Hey guys, welcome to another first of the month video. If you are new to the channel, you came at an opportune moment. We are sitting down today with pastor, author, speaker, father, world changer, Levi Lusko.
Hot pocket eater.
Yes. Amateur outdoor enthusiast.
For sure.
Yeah.
Passionate.
Even if you haven't heard of Levi before, you have heard him speak, because there is not another person on the planet who has impacted the way that I teach or the way that I speak or the way that I try to communicate than this guy right here. Fact and point, 2 weeks before I gave that what every 8th grade girl needs to hear talk that you've undoubtedly seen, I was in his office picking his brain, the Jedi Master. And so it's an honor, it's a privilege today, Levi, and I want to talk about this book that you wrote that really impacted the way that I thought, and I think that our viewers and our listeners would really do well to tune into this. So is it weird to see a book with your name on it?
100%. For sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me on this, and hi internet. I think back to my 6th grade teacher, and who gave me the hardest time in English class. And I think, what would she think if she found out I wrote a book? I think she would drop dead, actually, because the first thing I did when I signed my book contract was to Google what is a semicolon. I never knew, and I was like, if I have to write a book, the wall needs to come down. And basically, it extends a sentence.
Yeah. It's good to know. I mean, I teach gym, so
yeah,
I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I get the question a lot, and a lot of times on this channel, people ask questions about how to deal with anxiety and how to deal with depression and thoughts of suicide, and that's been a main focus this last calendar year. And so, hence the reason I want to have you on here, but also just this book speaks so well to that. And so, I just want to fire away some questions, and I really want these guys to be able to hear your perspective in that. So in this culture, in this generation, where do you feel are kind of the main sources of this anxiety epidemic? What are the main triggers?
Yeah, well, let me say that I think it's really cool that you're opening up this conversation and that you're wanting to make space for it to exist, because for far too long I think people kind of struggle in silence.
Sure.
And even just you as an authority figure, as an influencer, as a YouTuber, saying, hey look, we want to address this, I think it's going to give a lot of people permission to maybe bare their soul a little bit. So I think that's so great that you do that. As far as the reason, because it's undoubtedly rising in our day, the suicide rates, the rates of anxiety, the rates of depression, it is without a doubt rising. And that's so scary and so heartbreaking. I think there's a lot of contributing factors. Obviously, some of it's clinical, and some of it is and does need to be treated by a doctor and with a mental health professional. And there's no shame in getting counseling, no shame in getting help if you need a prescription, all of that. That's so important. And so there are just people with mental, health issues, diseases, and bipolar or whatever it is, schizophrenia. And so that's always existed. But what seems to be on the rise is behavior that has become normative in our day, that in all of human history has never been. And as I've talked to mental health professionals, seems like it can cause symptoms of mental health disorders that aren't actually there.
Sure.
So take Instagram, for example, Netflix, for example, Amazon Prime. We can live in a way where we're constantly being bombarded with noise, being bombarded with ideas. There's some who have just even postulated that our brains weren't created to constantly be hearing information, whether it's news. And some people turn ESPN on to go to sleep at night. I can't sleep without something going on. So you're going to wake up with the headphones and you're on the way to school. Then you're going to listen to your teachers talk. Then you're going to have Netflix. Then you're going to play Xbox while talking to your friend and checking Instagram in the down moments when the Xbox is reloading. And then you go to sleep without ESPN on. You've not had silence in your whole day.
Sure.
And so some say that our brain is wired to hear from our tribe and try to understand our place in the tribe. Therefore, it can't delineate between a TED Talk you're listening to, even a book on Audible. That's a good thing, between that and another human being. So it's always trying to utilize social skills, even when listening to a stranger talk in your earbuds.
Yeah.
And so it can actually cause you to become more depressed and anxious in that way.
Sure. So in that, and just the culture of noise and just non-stop feeds, I guess what would be some of the practical steps that you admittedly being somebody who throughout the course of your life has dealt with all the issues that you talk about in here, what do you put in place? What's your structure to prevent that from happening to you?
Such a good question. I think it has to be, there are some just real practical things we can do. Then there's some spiritual things that we can do. And then there's at times some clinical things that need to be done. And then there's some social things. There's a social component too. And I declare where I talk about, when I was in middle school and even some of the early years of high school, just dealing with some serious social issues. I was bullied in 8th grade, and I talk in the book about, not having my people, not having my crew, and wanting that so badly, and just kind of some of the harmful things, and nicknames and bullying. And of course, back then, it was in the early 90s, there wasn't Instagram and there wasn't the social media channels. I can't imagine dealing with that component today. And the ability to rank your life in your vacation and how much money you parents have with other people that you see flashing it online. But for me, it was hard enough. And so the thoughts, I think, kind of kicked in there. So what I've had to really do is choose to not live out of my insecurities.
Sure.
Because it's so easy to live out of I'm not enough and to write that story over your life. And so that's been a big one. The friendship piece, looking to the right voices, looking to the right people. And then for me, because I'm spiritual, I know we have similar beliefs, and maybe not all of you out there are on that train, but for me, it's knowing like there's deep inside my heart a yearning for something more that a human can't give me.
Yeah,
and so I think all those things kind of working together, it's like a stool, it needs all those 4 legs. So it's like the God piece, the friend piece, the figuring out how to have technology in your life without it controlling you.
Yeah, that's good. You and I live in a state that has the highest suicide rate in the nation per capita.
Jeez.
Which it just...
It took a dark turn. When you started with in a state, I was like, yeah, Montana, and I smiled. And then you busted out your bottom line, I was like, that's very sad.
It is. And that's, I think we have such an important responsibility, like you said, to tear open conversations like this, because there are people sitting at home watching this wondering about the next days and wondering if they're worth living for and fighting for. And that's been the heartbeat of this channel from day one. Amazing. Is that you are valuable and that you are worth it and that you do have a future, and that there are people who need your exact concoction of struggle and pain and insecurity and all those things. And I love like in this book, because like I feel like you were describing me in middle school. I think you and I would have been like friends in middle school. Amazing. As like I had buck teeth, and so I got a lot of hate that way. But just in this book, kind of like hearing you speak to myself and to so many people that reach out with these issues in our state with the highest suicide rate, what advice or what I don't know, what kind of strategies, you talk about the 4 keys of winning the battle within yourself with somebody who is literally in the fight of their life.
Well, I would say one thing is just to remember that as dark as it feels right now, like there's going to come a tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And with the passing of time, things can change a lot. I look at my life now and I look at like how good God's been. I look at, my kids and, that I get to be friends with you and go hiking and just all the things that happen now, and how easily it would have been to give that up in that moment, and when I was dealing with on a more regular basis those thoughts and the darkness, and I feel like there's no hope and there's no point, and it just can feel like real constricting. And so to rise above it and have some perspective, like to believe that the sun is going to rise tomorrow, to believe that dawn's coming, to believe that it can get better, and really figuring out, like I talk about in the book, how to speak that into existence, how to know when to call a friend. For me, what saved my life, and I don't want to spoil it if you haven't read it, but at the end of the book I talked about on the darkest night when I really felt like I was dealing with some of that anxiety and suicidal thoughts, to pick up the phone and call a friend and to be honest. because it's so easy to keep that and feel that shame if I can't tell anyone, if they knew they'd judge me. And I called someone I trusted, this was someone from my church, and I said, hey, here's what's going on in my head. I feel like I'm crazy. I feel like this is darkness that's overtaking me. And she just immediately was like, you know what, you're loved and you're cared for, and there's the people in your life are going to deal with this, we're going to get help, we're going to pray about it. And so I think I would say pick up the phone and to not let that be a secret you carry all by yourself.
When I heard a talk with someone who worked with the National Suicide Hotline recently, and they talked about just the impact of like that actual like voice-to-voice connection, even if it's like not, even if you're so scared or you're so uncertain to talk to somebody that you're worried about what they may think, picking up the phone and like calling and just hearing someone else's voice and saying you're not alone, because I feel like that is such an isolating thing with thoughts of suicide and depression. Everybody thinks that they're the weird one, that something's wrong with me, and it's like, this is a human issue. This is not a you issue. And so I think that's...
Well, and I think we also have to recognize, like, so oftentimes drugs and alcohol are involved, and I'm not saying like everyone who commits suicide is because of that, but I just think, if you get arrested drinking while driving, they call driving under the influence. And if you're under a chemicals influence, you're not as much under yours. And ideas can seem like better ideas. As a pastor, I've been to so many funerals where it's like, got drunk and rode on the ATVs, crashed into a tree. And it's like, that's not something you would do at the same level when you're sober. So just wise choices when it comes to substances, when it comes to who you're with, what you're watching, and just being careful,
One of my favorite analogies in the book, I definitely love analogies because it helps me understand stuff, but you talked about TSA on the brain. You talk about this analogy of like having, essentially hiring a TSA agent at the gate of our brain. Maybe just talk like a little bit about that. I just thought that was like it was such an applicable point for me to kind of take home and be like, wow, I'm not doing this.
100%.
And as soon as I started just even thinking about it and being intentional, I mean, a lot of this it's intentional living. And as soon as I started doing that, I noticed huge gains in just productivity and happiness and clarity and focus and
Well, sociologists talk about how many negative thoughts we have per day, and basically it boils down to just under 2 hours. And to think about, if you sleep 6 to 8 hours a day, you're spending about 2 hours on negative thinking. Intrusive thoughts, negative thoughts, thoughts of harm, thoughts just of, I'm the worst, why did I do that, whatever. Or even shockingly horrible thoughts, like they just pop in your head of doing something gnarly or dangerous or against the law or mean. And when these thoughts come in, our mistake is to let them sit there. And on average, the negative thought that shows up lasts for about 14 seconds or so, they say. And so that's a long time to sit there with something that you could be like, wait a minute, I'm not going to go on that train. They don't call it a train of thought for no reason. So if you think about it that way, every thought's taking you somewhere. And so even like, this interview's going to be terrible, or I'm probably going to blow this test. Your cognitive horsepower is allocated in a limited way. So if you think about like horsepower in a car, you can't be using that horsepower to go forward and backward at the same time.
Sure.
It's only one direction. So they can track the amount of worrying you do while you're taking a test will take away from the ability to do well on a test. You can't use it for worrying your horsepower and use it for doing well. So apply that out in a million ways in your mind. When you're thinking a direction, that's where you're going to steer. Where you stare, you're going to steer, right? So when you install TSA, you're basically saying, hey, this is my mind, and I'm not going to allow thoughts to sit here that I don't want to take me somewhere I don't want to be. So just choosing in that moment to use scripture language, and again, I apologize, I'm a pastor, the Bible says take thoughts captive. So I view it TSA. And I bring a water bottle from TSA, they're like, yeah, you're not bringing that. It's our airport. And I can't say, well, I'm coming anyway. They're like, no, you're not. You're going to jail. So if you go, hey, this is my mind, this is my brain, and I have a life I want to live, and it's going to go to good things and positivity and kindness and all of that. So when these thoughts pop up, I can't stop them from showing up, but I don't have to let them in.
Sure, that's good. That's really good. I get a lot of messages from people who are going through really difficult, horrific situations. In your first book, Through the Eyes of a Lion, you talk about losing your daughter, Lenya, and I read that book as well, and have passed it along to people who have been hurting. What I guess what would you say to someone who, being someone who's gone through heart-wrenching grief, what would you say to somebody who's watching this and going through a divorce with their parents or an abusive relationship or the death of someone close?
Yeah. Well, I'd say first of all, don't do it alone. For us, that's meant a community, and for us, that's meant good friends. It's also meant professional help. We've gotten counseling to work through some of that stuff. Some of the positive stuff and the thinking stuff I had to apply in grief. Because in grief, it's almost like your brain is like a washing machine, and you're just constantly every minute churning through. You don't really know what way you're going to come up. There's like the cycle of grief, like bargaining and anger and acceptance eventually. But I found I would like go to acceptance for a minute and then be back at anger, and it wasn't like so much like I'm here at this one, now I'm going that one. It's like I would be all over the map. And in those moments, it was more important than ever to call the friends I needed to call. And even if it was just like a quick text, like, hey, pray for me, I'm spiraling, bro. I'm having a real crappy day. And to be honest, and really learning to manage myself. And that was kind of what warranted I Declare War, was realizing like, hey, I've survived years of grief and all that, the hard stuff, the trauma of middle school, which they've proven for most people is the most challenging time of life. And that's real. But it gets better, and with time, like the friends that right now mean everything, in 20 years, you might not talk to those guys at all. And right now they're everything, and social media is everything, but it's like, just remember, like that's like, it can be a molehill that's actually a molehill, not a mountain, it feels like. But yeah, so I would say, people in your life, people in your community, get the help you need, and then just one day at a time. Grieving is a marathon. But if you keep taking little baby steps of a day at a time, I don't want to survive a year. I just need to get through today. And then eventually one day you look down and you go like, I've gotten stronger. By actually opening it up, not numbing, which is so tempting to do. Again, the drugs and alcohol thing, like it would be easy to numb that, but you're only delaying the inevitable because you're going to have to do it eventually.
You talk a lot about how pain is a microphone, and I've seen. I've been around since the beginning at Fresh Life Church, and I've seen how God has used you and your family and your wife incredibly, but especially in the days past. Losing Lenya. Maybe speak just for a second about how there's purpose in pain, and that there's power in it too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no matter what you've gone through, what you faced, I had the privilege a while back to meet Louis Zamperini, who his book Angelina Jolie made into the movie Unbroken. And shaking his hand, it was like a treasure. I mean, he's since then passed away, but shaking his hand, I thought about, this is a guy been shot down in a plane, concentration camp, tortured, beaten, ended up being marooned in a raft, all these days, floating around the river, like starving to death. And yet, like, here's someone who's like full of hope, full of brightness, and has encouraged people all around the world. Told his story to the whole world, literally through book and movie. And so I just think like there's strength in the struggle, and that sounds trite and cliche and hackneyed, and it's gonna be okay, bro. You're gonna be a butterfly, but there's some truth to it. That people who go through the hardest things get used in the most profound ways. And so I would just encourage you that the most difficult dark night can be the occasion that you can shine like a bright star. And seldom has someone ever been used in a significant way in the world that hasn't had to pay a price for it and go through hardship and go through difficulty. And so if you think about like making Tabasco sauce, they put it in barrels and they leave it for years, and it's like forgotten and it's dark and it's horrible, but then all of a sudden one day it's brought out and it's this beautiful spice everyone loves in their food, but it's aged. And so I would just encourage you, like, in a way, like, you're not buried, you're planted, and you're not forgotten. You're being prepared for greater things.
Yeah, and if you've been blessed by anything on this channel, everything I've spoken from has come from like those worst days, or a lot of the struggles and the tears that at the time you think are wasted, but then you get to talk to somebody who's been through it, or heard you share stories of just weeping with families who have been in a similar situation, and just being able to be
whatever you've gone through, you're not the only one. And there's people that you get to give purpose to and help them through that.
Do you still experience those moments of anxiety and then just kind of like negative thoughts that you talk about in the book, and if so, kind of like how do you talk yourself through that? How do you navigate it?
Good. So for sure, 2-3 a.m. I still wake up sometimes scared and frightened, and whether it's a bad dream or thoughts of like crazy thoughts, like this isn't gonna work out. My whole it just in the middle of the night you wake up and your mind is like a foreign environment, and it almost seems like I'm scared about my kids, or I'm frightened about something happening to my wife or my dad, or you just feel those thoughts. In those moments, it's important for me to ground myself. Some deep breathing. I've learned really powerful help comes when you take some deep breaths. Silence and solitude are important for me. I can tell if I'm not getting enough time alone. Like for me, it's a long walk without my phone. And if it's been too long without that, some of those things that I put into practice every day that help me. But when I'm at my lowest point, those triggers easily bring me back, and then I have to reground myself with some true statements and some positivity, some deep breathing. For me, it's prayer, it's scripture reading, it's being willing to text a friend and be vulnerable. I feel like it's all connected though to health, eating. If I'm not hydrated, if I'm not sleeping well, it's all cyclical. And they can actually track, depression, anxiety, all the things along with our diminishing sleep and our increased constant technology use. So, it's like the good of the internet. Obviously, we're using it today for good. You're using it to bless people all the time, but it comes at a cost. Just like a car can get you to cross the country, but can also destroy you.
Sure. When I think as fathers of young boys, I think we see that exactly what we talked about firsthand, that a lot of times it's just the basics, that it's, have you got enough sleep? Have you got enough food? Do you need a snack? And I feel like with Caleb at 3 years old, it's like, the entire world could be melting down and he gets 10 calories in his mouth and things turn around.
But who gave him his first cheeseburger? That's what I really want.
That's true. Levi, broke the McDonald's free cycle.
I introduced him to the golden arches, baby. You're welcome.
10 years haven't had a McDonald's in our family blood. And
if he ever experiences diabetes, a good point. Straight back to that moment.
I'll bring it back to you.
But it's funny. I was watching an interview with Casey Neistat, literally the biggest YouTuber in the world, and he was asked about entertainment at his home. He said it's a YouTube-free environment. He will not let his kids be on YouTube. And I'm like, well, hold on a second. Let's just talk about that. He knows what's out there. He knows what it can do. But he's like, for my daughter, it's like I buy the shows. I'm not letting her watch Peppa Pig on YouTube. He said we buy it on iTunes and she watches it on her device or whatever. And it's just like he's realizing what's been unleashed is a powerful thing and needs to be used carefully.
Yeah, well, we've been on kind of a march in our school to limit cell phone use in school because they're allowed. And a lot of the schools, like in Silicon Valley, where they're creating these devices, they're outlawing cell phone use, in the school at all. One school had this magnetic box that you'd actually check in your phone. It would close at 8 when the school day started. It's like, okay, well, what do these people know that we're not actually taking advantage of? But I think a lot of it's just those little things and just basics.
Just because we have it doesn't mean we have to use it.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
And to use it for good rather than being used by it, I think is good.
Moments.
Well, I mean, if you haven't already been encouraged to pick up a copy, I'm a gym teacher. I don't read a whole lot of books. I know you're a voracious reader. I am not as much, but this was something that blessed my socks off, and I read it twice, and you would do well. There's a link down below to where you can pick up the book, and also if you want to hear more from Levi, you can check out his channel as well, or Fresh Life Church. You guys have been such a blessing to us, and just want to publicly just thank you for your leadership in my life. There's few people on the planet who I look up to more and who have had a bigger impact on me as a teacher and a father and a husband and a leader. And so I just thank you for that.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Appreciate it.
Last question. Lighter note. We're going lighter notes.
I like that.
We're past.
We went through this.
Some would say in the past couple of years you've become quite the outdoor enthusiast, kind of pushing boundaries and whatnot. What would be your greatest proudest moment as a Montanan?
Well, I think the century rides for sure.
Yeah.
I think I have 4 century rides. I've done 100-mile bike rides. Nice. And I feel like no matter who you are, that's a respectable accomplishment.
That is.
Especially with the elevation gains. You can't go 100 miles in this state without pulling some serious, gains. So
Absolutely.
I've cramped up across the 75 mile, the 75 mile mark. Every time I would cramp up, and like pushing through 25 more miles, cramping like crazy.
Yeah.
I'm proud of that.
Well, even just sitting on a bike seat for that long is quite the endeavor.
Yeah.
Last question. You spend more time speaking on stage than anybody else I know. What would you say is your worst on stage fail?
Ooh, there's been so many. There was some last night. The weirdest moment once was some random dog got on the stage, came in from the back of the church, and somebody left their door propped open, and it ended up on stage behind me. And so everyone was laughing, and when I turned, it went behind a piano. And so I'm looking, I understand why people were laughing. I was so confused. So that was pretty bad. Then there was right after my wisdom teeth got taken out, I spoke, and my dry sockets came out, and so my mouth was filling up with blood. And so that was pretty terrible.
That sounds like the worst thing ever.
But probably the worst was when I fell off the stage in Bozeman. I was speaking at our church there, and the darkness and the stage made it too hard to tell. And I took a step forward, and luckily it was only 2 feet. If it was here, I'd probably die.
Yeah.
But I went down right there. So.
And how did you recover from that?
You don't recover. You
tried to work it into a joke.
You just go, man.
Hey guys,
I'm an idiot, and then you just try and move on.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time, guys. There are links down below to get your hands on this book, and thanks again.
Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Subscribe.
Every month we see more and more views from non-subscribers.
Hit the like button, thumbs up, not thumbs down, thumbs up. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.